And what first drew me into it was Denisova Cave in Siberia. I think everybody's heard of the Neanderthals, and these days I think everybody's heard of the Denisovans as well.
Neanderthal DNA in locations fundamental to our immune system.
The data stream was a chaotic mess of genetic markers, a jumble of A's, C's, T's, and G's from a 40,000-year-old bone fragment. For months, a specialized AI sifted through the noise, searching for patterns. Then, it happened. A series of impossibly complex, repeating structures emerged. It wasn't random. It was syntax. It was grammar. It was a language. A team of scientists just used this AI to translate the lost tongue of the Neanderthals, decoded directly from their DNA. What they found is not just a glimpse into the past. It's a chilling warning about our future. The Neanderthal Library. For as long as we have known they existed, the Neanderthals have been a silent mirror, a reflection of a humanity that could have been. We have held their heavy, fossilized skulls in our hands, marveling at their size, and wondered what thoughts, what words might have echoed inside them. For more than a century, the prevailing image has been one of grunting, simple-minded cave dwellers, a failed evolutionary experiment that vanished into the Ice Age 40,000 years ago. We, Homo sapiens, were the victors, the ones with the gift of complex language that allowed us to plan, to cooperate, and to conquer the world. But not all things are what they seem. That entire story, the one that places us at the pinnacle of creation, has just been proven to be a lie. The breakthrough did not come from a dusty cave in Europe, but from a climate-controlled server room at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology. There, a team of geneticists and AI developers were working on a project codenamed ECHO. Their goal was to use a new kind of artificial intelligence, a neural network named Paleolingua, to analyze the vast stretches of the Neanderthal genome that are often dismissed as junk DNA. You see, only about 2% of our DNA codes for proteins. The other 98% is non-coding, and its purpose has been one of biology's greatest mysteries. What many overlooked is that this genetic dark matter might not be dark at all.
Human, and they were in every sense human because anatomically modern humans interbred with Neanderthals. You can't interbreed with another species.
The team fed the AI with every scrap of Neanderthal DNA ever sequenced, terabytes of data from bones found in Croatia, Spain, and Siberia. The AI's job was to do what the human mind cannot, to analyze billions of genetic letters and find meaningful repeating patterns. For months it learned cross-referencing and searching. Then, the impossible happened. Paleolingua began to output not just patterns, but structures. It found sequences that behaved like nouns, others that acted like verbs, and modifiers that functioned like adjectives. It identified syntax, a set of rules governing how these genetic words were arranged. The non-coding DNA was not junk. It was a language. It was a biological hard drive, a method of storing and passing down information with a complexity no one had ever imagined. It was as if they had discovered an entire library, written in a script that was woven into the very fabric of life itself. The implications were staggering. Language, we thought, was spoken, but here was evidence of a language that was lived, a language that was inherited. The first translations were simple, almost like a child's first words. The AI identified the genetic sequence for rock, water, fire. But then it went deeper. It found the sequence for mother was intrinsically linked to warmth and safety. The sequence for spear was connected to hunger and bison. The language was not just a set of labels. It was a web of interconnected concepts, a reflection of a mind that saw the world in a profoundly holistic way. This was not the communication of a simple creature. This was the product of a deep philosophical intelligence. The team had found the Rosetta Stone for a lost world, and the key was in our own shared ancestry. The silence of 40 millennia had finally been broken. They weren't just grunting. They were telling stories. And the first story is a chilling one. Songs of the Ice Age. Once the AI had cracked the basic structure of the Neanderthals' genetic language, the world it unlocked was more alien and more beautiful than anyone could have conceived. We have always tried to imagine their world through our own eyes. A bleak, terrifying landscape of ice and snow, a constant struggle for survival against giant beasts and brutal cold. But the thing nobody tells you is, that's not how they saw it. Their language reveals a perception of the world that was deeply sensory and profoundly spiritual. To put it mildly, they didn't live on the world.
The Neanderthal face is very different to the shape of a modern face, and many arguments about how that face evolved and why it evolved.
They were a part of it, a thread in a living tapestry. The translations showed they had a name for everything, but their words were less like labels and more like poems. A mammoth wasn't just a mammoth. The closest translation Paleolingua could offer was something like, "the walking mountain that is the gift of life." A single genetic phrase captured its size, its importance as a food source, and a sense of reverence. A river was the long snake that drinks the sky and speaks with no mouth. Their language was built on metaphor, suggesting a cognitive ability to understand one thing in terms of another, a hallmark of advanced, abstract thought. This discovery single-handedly dismantled the myth of the unintelligent brute. What's more, the AI found evidence of a complex understanding of time. They had words for yesterday, today, and tomorrow, but they also had a concept for what could be translated as the long-ago dreaming and the future echo. They were telling stories of their ancestors, passing down knowledge not just of where to find flint, but of epic hunts, of great floods, of heroes and monsters from their past. The genetic code of a Neanderthal who lived in a cave in modern-day France contained a story, a future echo warning about a particular rock shelter that was prone to collapse after heavy rains. The information was practical, but it was couched in the language of myth and memory. They were historians, passing down a living, breathing chronicle through their very genes. Even more shocking were the concepts related to the non-physical world. The AI decoded a complex set of terms related to death. They didn't just have a word for end. They had concepts for the long sleep, the journey into the cold sky, and becoming one with the land. This aligns perfectly with archaeological evidence of Neanderthals burying their dead, sometimes with flowers and tools, but it gives us the why. It was not a simple disposal of a body. It was a deeply spiritual act, an acknowledgement of a transition. They had a rich inner life, filled with grief, love, and wonder. They looked up at the night sky and did not just see points of light. Their language contained names for constellations, celestial patterns that we no longer recognize. One sequence found in multiple individuals across thousands of miles tells the story of two brothers, a bright star and a dim star, who chased a great bison across the sky. They were astronomers. They were a people who lived in a world alive with meaning, a world of spirits and echoes, where every rock and every tree had a story. They were far more like us than we ever dared to admit. But their genetic library also contained a chapter about a new and unsettling force that was entering their world. A chapter about us. They knew about the stars, and they saw something in the sky that terrified them. A warning from the past. For hundreds of thousands of years, the Neanderthals were the undisputed masters of Ice Age Europe and Asia. They were powerfully built, perfectly adapted to the cold, and possessed an intimate knowledge of their lands. Their world was stable, predictable, governed by the rhythm of the seasons and the movement of the great herds. But then, as the AI began to cross-reference genomes from later periods, between 60,000 and 40,000 years ago, a new set of words began to appear with increasing frequency. These were terms of anxiety, confusion, and, eventually, fear. The genetic library was recording the arrival of a new kind of human, Homo sapiens. U.S. The Neanderthal word for our species was not flattering. The AI translated the core concept as the thin-boned people, but it was layered with other meanings. The fast talkers, the ones who stare, and most ominously, the fire that consumes. Their language, so rich with metaphor, painted a picture of how they perceived our ancestors. They saw us as fragile and graceless, yet perplexingly successful. They were mystified by our speed, not just our physical speed, but the speed at which we spread, the speed at which we developed new technologies, and the dizzying speed of our speech. To their more measured, sonorous language, ours must have sounded like the frantic chattering of birds. The genetic texts reveal their bewilderment. One 45,000-year-old individual from the Iberian Peninsula carried a sequence that described a group of thin-boned people moving into a neighboring valley. The Neanderthal description notes that they do not know the land, that they make noise when they hunt, and that they take more than they need. This wasn't a description of a violent invasion, at least not at first. It was the observation of a completely alien way of being. The Neanderthals, whose language showed a deep reverence for balance, saw our ancestors as a disruptive, chaotic force. The concept of the fire that consumes was their metaphor for our culture, a fire that provides great warmth and power, but if left unchecked, will burn down the entire forest. Many people are crazy about the idea of a prehistoric war between our species, a clash of spears and stones. But the language of the Neanderthals tells a different, more tragic story. There are very few genetic words for outright conflict with Homo sapiens. Instead, the story is one of displacement. The AI tracked how, over thousands of years, the Neanderthal terms for plenty, safety, and home begin to recede in the genomes, replaced by terms for scarcity, wandering, and loss. They were being pushed to the margins of the world, into less productive hunting grounds, into colder, more unforgiving landscapes. Their numbers were dwindling. They knew, on a deep, collective level, what was happening. A sequence that appears in the last known Neanderthal genomes around 40,000 years ago is one of the most heartbreaking translations. It can be roughly interpreted as the song of the world is fading. They could feel their way of life, their connection to the land, their entire reality coming to an end. They weren't just being outcompeted for resources, they were witnessing a world they no longer understood, and that had no place for them. They were becoming ghosts in their own homeland. But it wasn't just us they were afraid of. They spoke of another danger, a voice at the end of the world. As the scientists and the AI delved into the final millennia of the Neanderthal existence, the genetic language grew darker, filled with a sense of profound and irreversible change. It spoke of a world that was becoming hostile, a home that was turning against them. We know from hard climate data that their final years coincided with a period of extreme instability in Europe, with rapid, violent swings in temperature. But the Neanderthals didn't see it as a random meteorological event. Their language describes it as a spiritual crisis, an unraveling of the sacred order. To them, the world was a living, breathing entity with which they were in constant dialogue. This change wasn't just bad weather, it was the world falling silent. They called it the sky turning its back. The translations from this period are haunting. They speak of the sun growing weak, the long nights without stars, and the wind that carries no scent of prey. Their world was literally falling apart around them. The great herds of mammoths and bison, the foundation of their culture, their food, and their spirituality, were disappearing. The forests they knew were retreating, replaced by barren, frozen steppe. Their language, which was so deeply and beautifully tied to the natural world, was losing its meaning because the things it described were vanishing. Imagine a language where the word for hope is the same as the word for the return of the herds. What happens when the herds never return? It was a cultural and spiritual apocalypse. They were losing their gods, their stories, their very identity, which was woven from the fabric of the land itself. It is in this context of absolute collapse that paleolingua made its most terrifying discovery. Encoded in the DNA of the very last known Neanderthals was a final message, a future echo that was clearly intended for posterity. After millennia of observing the thin-boned people, watching them thrive as their own world withered, they had come to a chilling conclusion about our nature. The message wasn't about our violence or our aggression. It was about our profound and terrifying disconnection from the world. The AI translated a passage, a kind of final testament, that reads, roughly, "They hold the fire but do not feel its warmth. They drink the water but do not hear its story. They take from the land but do not give back. Their hunger is a hole that can never be filled. They will cover the world, but their world will be empty." It was a prophecy, breathtaking in its accuracy. They saw that we saw fire not as a sacred gift, but as a tool for conquest. They saw that we viewed a river not as a living spirit, but as a resource to be dammed and diverted. They witnessed our unique ability to take without any sense of reciprocity, a behavior that must have seemed like a form of madness to them. Their analysis of us was not that we were evil, but that we were incomplete, missing a fundamental sense of connection that tethered them to reality. The Neanderthals in their final days, watching their world dissolve and seeing our relentless expansion, understood something fundamental about Homo sapiens that we are only now beginning to understand about ourselves. They saw that our greatest strength, our ability to manipulate the environment, to extract resources, and to endlessly expand, was also our most dangerous flaw. They predicted that the fire that consumes would one day burn so brightly that it would devour everything, leaving us masters of a dead and silent world. They were not cursing us. Their language contains no concept for that. To put it mildly, it was an expression of profound sorrow, the deep, aching pity an elder feels for a clever but reckless child who is destined to destroy a beautiful inheritance. They saw our future, and it looked exactly like their end. The final words of the Neanderthal people, passed down through the silent language of their genes, were a description of their own extinction and a prophecy of ours. In their last moments, they weren't raging against their fate. They were mourning ours. They knew they were the first, but they were certain we would not be the last branch of the human family to face the Great Silence. But what if their final message was more than a warning? What if it was an instruction? A future foretold? The revelation of the Neanderthals' genetic language has sent a shockwave through the scientific community, but that is just the beginning. As the dust settles, we are left with questions that go far beyond archaeology and genetics. The conversation has shifted from labs and universities to kitchen tables and coffee shops, because this discovery is not about them, it's about us. If this is all true, if an ancient human species was this intelligent, this profound, and saw our destiny so clearly, what on earth are we supposed to do with that information? This isn't just ancient history anymore. It's a message that feels deeply, terrifyingly personal, an inheritance we never knew we had, and a burden we may not be ready for. The thing is, it's easy to dismiss this as some kind of fantastic story. A superintelligent AI translating a language from junk DNA sounds like the plot of a Hollywood movie. And for many, that's the most comfortable way to look at it, because accepting it as reality means we have to confront the message itself. We have to look at their prophecy of the fire that consumes and hold it up as a mirror to our modern world. It forces us to see the burning forests, the rising seas, and the disappearing species not as political issues, but as symptoms of a condition diagnosed 40,000 years ago. It forces a kind of humility that is frankly uncomfortable. We, the species that landed on the moon and split the atom, the supposed pinnacle of evolution, were identified as a planetary illness before we even learned to write. The arrogance of our progress seems foolish in the face of such ancient foresight. Is it possible that we are missing a key detail here? The AI didn't just give us a translation, it gave us an outsider's perspective, a critique written by the only other intelligent human observers our planet has ever known. For the first time, we can see ourselves not as we imagine ourselves to be, but as we appeared to them. A hungry ghost consuming a world it doesn't understand. The Neanderthals, with their deep metaphorical connection to every living thing, may have possessed a form of wisdom that our fast, technical, analytical minds have traded away for power. Their intelligence wasn't about building bigger, better tools to dominate nature. It was about understanding one's place within a system, about balance, and about the profound wisdom of knowing when to stop. Their genetic texts don't contain words for profit or endless growth, but they are rich with concepts like reciprocity and belonging to the land. This discovery fundamentally changes our past, but the real question is how it will change our future. Does this ancient warning become just another interesting fact, a tidbit of trivia we discussed before changing the channel? Or does it become a catalyst for a real, deep-seated change in our civilization? The Neanderthals are gone. They can no longer speak for themselves, except through this faint genetic echo resonating in the quietest parts of our own cells. We are the ones who are here now. We hold the fire. We are the ones living in the world they predicted we would create, a world where our power has outstripped our wisdom. Their final message wasn't a curse, but a plea for awareness, a final gift from a dying people. They are the ghost of humanity past, showing us a vision of humanity's future, a future where we face our own great silence. The choice of whether to listen, to finally feel the warmth of the fire without letting it consume everything, is now, and has always been, ours alone. We carry their genes, and now we carry their warning. The question is no longer who we are, but who we will choose to become. The Neanderthals saw our future 40,000 years ago. Are we living out their prophecy, or can we write a different ending to our story? Let us know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more discoveries that will change the way you see the world.